I never thought I'd end up in the hospital, not like this. Not because of the things I had learned to ignore, the things I had been taught to accept as normal. But here I was, cold and alone in a sterile hospital room, hooked to heart monitors and IV drips, my body too weak to even sit up. The beeping of the machines sounded like a countdown I had barely survived. But it wasn't just the food or the lack of it, it wasn't even the weight, it was the years of lies. The years of pretending everything was perfect when it was falling apart right under my nose. I was starving, yes, but I was also starving for something more, for truth, for love, for the family I thought I had. And then there was the family dinner, the one time a day when we were all supposed to be together. It was supposed to be the perfect family moment. Ed, the ever smiling provider, would sit at the head of the table, dishing out servings of his homemade pasta, always asking, "How was your day, honey?" He'd laugh, and we'd all laugh with him. My younger sister would bounce in her seat, eager to share her latest school story. And then there was me sitting silently, pretending to eat, pretending to be happy. Mom would always make sure everything was just right. She pick up the plates, make sure we didn't ask for anything extra. The smell of food filled the air, but I could never quite feel full. It wasn't about the food, though. It was about the feeling, the empty feeling in my stomach that seemed to mirror the emptiness inside. Remember the first time it happened? I was 11 and I sat at the table as usual, my plate untouched. I don't think anyone noticed at first, or maybe they did, but chose to ignore it. My dad asked, "Why is the plate empty?" It wasn't a concerned question. It wasn't even a question, really. It was a casual observation like any other. But in that moment, everything shifted. Before I could answer, I felt my mom's fingers dig into my shoulder, her nails sharp and unforgiving. "She's not hungry," she said, her voice too calm for my liking. "She had a big snack after school, didn't you, honey?" Wanted to speak up. I wanted to say, "No, Mom, I didn't have a snack. I haven't eaten all day," but instead I just nodded. I smiled weakly, trying to make it seem like everything was fine, and my dad, oblivious, ruffled my hair and said, "Good girl," before turning back to the TV. I knew that was the end of it. I wouldn't be allowed to ask for anything. I would sit there, my stomach empty, and pretend it wasn't bothering me. That night I ate nothing. I went to bed hungry, but I didn't dare ask for food. I wasn't allowed to. It wasn't about hunger, it was about control. The next few years passed, and I became invisible in a way that wasn't obvious. On the outside, everything seemed fine. My family looked perfect, too perfect. My mom, who could do everything with a smile, was always in charge. Her discipline was firm, her expectations high. But when it came to me, things were different. It's always the perfect one. She was sweet, tiny, and looked just like Mom wanted. Mom would give her all the attention, all the love, and I was left in the background, ignored and unseen. I remember the times I would sit next to at the table, watching as she ate her meal, laughing at something Dad had said. I wanted to laugh too. I wanted to feel normal. But there was a nagging voice in my head telling me I didn't deserve to eat, that I didn't deserve to take up space. The weight of those words became heavier as time passed. My plate always remained empty and my stomach always grumbled, but I ignored it. I was learning how to go unnoticed, how to become invisible in a house full of people who didn't see me for who I really was. They saw the quiet, the obedient daughter, the one who never complained. But even in the silence, I could feel the cracks starting to show. The cracks in my own body, the tiredness, the dizziness, the fainting, but no one noticed. Not even my dad, who loved me, not even who was just a kid. And Mom, she made sure to keep it that way. She made sure I stayed quiet. I had my own rules by then. I didn't ask for more food. I didn't ask for attention. I didn't make a sound. I simply existed. And somehow I convinced myself that was enough. But inside, I was breaking. And then one evening, everything came crashing down. Remember the mornings that started the same way? It was early, around 6:55 a.m. when I would drag myself out of bed. Mom would already be up making breakfast, the sounds of sizzling eggs and the sweet smell of pancakes filling the house. I was usually the first one at the table, eagerly awaiting her meal. Mom would smile at her, her voice soft and affectionate as she asked about the previous day, her favorite part of school, and what friends she was meeting later that afternoon. And then there was me. I was the bubbly one. I was the one who made Mom laugh. I was the one who filled Dad's heart with pride. I was the perfect daughter. I was just me, the older one, the one who couldn't get things right. Mom would hardly notice when I came down to the kitchen, dragging myself behind, feeling the weight of the unspoken expectations settle on my shoulders. "Good morning," she would say, her tone cold as though it was an afterthought. Then she'd turn back to, her full attention fixed on her. "Your dress looks so pretty today," Mom would gush. "It's like it was made just for you. You're just perfect." I didn't have a dress to wear. I never did. My clothes were always secondhand or hand-me-downs, something I didn't mind at first. But I soon realized it wasn't just the clothes. It was everything. The way she showered with affection, how she praised her at every opportunity while I was left unnoticed as if I was invisible. I used to think I was too much, too big, too loud, too flawed. Was so small, so delicate, she was everything I was. So I started to disappear in every way I could. It wasn't about being noticed anymore. It was about being quiet enough to not disturb the perfect image of the family that my mom worked so hard to maintain. When I was 12, I became an expert at blending into the background. I would sit at the table but barely touch my food. Had a full plate with sandwiches, cookies, and a drink while I sat there pushing around a few celery sticks and a single rice cake. I remember the look on her face. She didn't know why, but she seemed confused, like she wanted to ask but didn't know how. "Is okay?" she would ask innocently. And Mom would always answer before I could. "Oh, she's fine. She's just not hungry today. You know how it is. She's growing up." I never told the truth. How could I? She was so perfect in every way. I wasn't sure I even wanted her to know. It hurt too much. It wasn't just the food, it was everything. Every morning while Dad was still in the shower, Mom would insist I stand on the scale. It was a ritual that was never spoken about, but it happened every day without fail. The scale was hidden in the back of her closet as though it was a secret no one else should know. But I did. I knew that the number on that scale would determine my worth for the day. 65, that was the first number I saw. It wasn't much, but it wasn't good enough either. Mom's face would tighten and she'd announce, "Up 2 pounds from yesterday." Her voice would carry a sharp edge laced with disappointment. "You don't want to get too big now, do you?" she'd asked, her gaze cold, almost calculating. "No breakfast today." Wanted to protest, wanted to say something, anything to make her stop, but the words never came. Instead, I'd stand there silent, feeling the weight of her gaze. The truth was, I didn't want to fight her. I just wanted her approval, and I was willing to do whatever it took to get it. My sweet little sister was none the wiser. To her, Mom was perfect as she always seemed to be. She never questioned the rules. She didn't notice how I sat quietly at the table while she ate a sandwich, or how she would comment on how nice her meals always were while I barely touched mine. I watched as Mom would shower her with compliments. "You're growing so beautifully, you've always been perfect in every way." And I was just the girl who took up too much space, the girl who couldn't quite meet Mom's standards. Would try to offer me her food sometimes. She'd push her sandwich toward me, her eyes full of innocence and concern. "Do you want some of mine?" she'd ask. But I could never take it. I could never eat in front of her. She didn't know, but I couldn't bear the thought of her seeing the truth of what was happening behind closed doors. Mom's secret scale became my enemy. Every morning it was the same ritual. The sharp numbers that determined whether I would eat that day, the cold voice that judged me. I knew I had to keep it hidden from Dad. He didn't know about the scale. He didn't know what was happening to me. He didn't know how Mom's rules were suffocating me. One morning I stood on the scale again. 63, the number dropped, but I could feel her disapproval already. You're slipping, Mom would say, her voice cold. You're not trying hard enough. You need to be careful. We don't want you to be like the others. We don't want you to get too big. I remember the sound of her voice like a whip crack. I could feel it in my bones. I could feel my body becoming smaller, weaker, but it was never enough. No matter how small I became, it was never enough. Through all of this, Dad remained blissfully unaware. He worked long hours, and when he came home, he was too tired to notice the tension between Mom and me. He never saw the way Mom controlled everything, how she would silently dictate what I could and couldn't do. He never saw the way she would undermine my every action, every attempt to assert myself. He never saw how much I needed his attention, his love, how I desperately wanted him to notice me, but he didn't. He never saw the cracks. And then there was the one moment when it all fell apart, when I thought I had finally found a way out. It all started when I turned 15. The fainting spells became more frequent, the dizziness more intense. My once strong body was weakening, and I felt it in every corner of my being. I couldn't stand for long without feeling like the world was spinning around me, my knees giving out, my vision blurring. The pain in my body was a constant reminder of what I had been doing to myself, but the strange part, I didn't care. I had stopped caring a long time ago. School, I had started to notice that I couldn't focus like I used to. My classmates seemed so full of energy, laughing and joking around. Meanwhile, I sat in the back trying to stay awake in class, barely able to hold a pen. The teachers started to look at me differently, and I couldn't hide the truth anymore. They noticed the way my clothes hung off me, the way I looked like I was barely holding it together, but no one said anything, not really. They didn't want to get involved. It was easier to pretend everything was fine. By this point, I was too weak to keep pretending. I had questions in my mind, questions I had been too scared to ask before. Was I the only one feeling like this? Was it normal to feel like I was fading away, to feel invisible? Was this really how things were supposed to be? And why did no one notice? Why did my dad never ask about the empty plate? One day I sat at the dinner table, my plate pushed aside once again. Was eating her dinner, happily chatting away about her school project, while my mom watched her intently, making sure she ate enough. I couldn't help but feel the distance growing between us. I was just a child, but she was always the perfect one, the one who could do no wrong. I didn't even want to talk about food anymore. I couldn't face the lies anymore, not even for my own sake. Why don't you eat? Dad asked suddenly, looking up from his plate, his voice filled with concern. For a moment, the room went silent. The fork I was holding trembled in my hand. I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to admit the truth. Before I could answer, Mom's eyes flashed at me sharp and cold. She turned to Dad, her voice tight. She's just not hungry, she said quickly. She had a snack earlier, I told you. I could feel the lies sitting heavy in the air. I hadn't eaten anything today. I had barely eaten for the past few days. I had grown used to the feeling of emptiness, the hunger that gnawed at me but that I pushed away. It was easier to pretend it wasn't happening. But the tension in the room was palpable. Dad didn't look convinced. His brow furrowed as he looked at me, but Mom quickly changed the subject, going back to talking about the weather and dance recital. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream to let out all the pain, but I didn't. I just sat there pretending everything was fine, but deep down I knew it was. Things got worse after that. The dizziness turned into nausea. I couldn't stand for more than a few minutes without feeling like I was going to pass out. I started to isolate myself more and more, disappearing into the background where no one could see me, no one could question me. The physical breakdown became too much to ignore. One day at school, I collapsed in the hallway. I don't even remember what happened exactly. I just remember the feeling of my legs giving way beneath me, the darkness closing in around me. I woke up in the nurse's office, my head spinning, my heart racing, and the nurse looking down at me with concern. You need to go to the doctor, she said, her voice gentle but firm. This isn't normal. You've been pushing yourself too hard. You're not eating enough. But I knew I was eating enough. I knew what was happening, but the words wouldn't come out. I couldn't admit it, not to anyone, not yet. The nurse handed me a bottle of water and asked if I needed to go home, but I shook my head, saying I was fine. I was fine, but I didn't want anyone to know. I couldn't let them see. Not now, not ever. That evening, Dad came home early. He was concerned. He had noticed something was off. He could see it now, the way I had been avoiding meals, the way I had been slipping away. I need to talk to you, he said softly, pulling me aside in the kitchen while I was watching TV in the other room. His voice was serious. There was no laughter, no detraction, just the two of us. I've noticed you haven't been eating. You've been looking sick, he said, his face full of concern. Is everything okay? For the first time in years, I felt like I couldn't hide anymore. The tears were threatening to spill, but I swallowed them down. I couldn't let him see. I didn't want him to see. Before I could speak, Mom stepped in, her voice cold and controlled. Don't listen to her, she said quickly, her eyes flicking to me, the warning clear. She's fine. She's just going through a phase, nothing to worry about. But I saw it, the way Dad looked at her. He wasn't convinced. He was starting to put the pieces together. I didn't know how much longer I could keep lying, how much longer I could pretend that everything was fine. And then it happened, the thing that would change everything. It was a regular night. Dad was watching TV, was in her room, and Mom was cleaning the kitchen. I sat at the table, my plate once again untouched. My stomach was in knots, and my head felt like it was spinning. I couldn't keep pretending. Mom, I said, my voice barely a whisper, I'm hungry. I hadn't said that in so long. I hadn't let myself want food for so long, but now I couldn't deny it anymore. She didn't respond immediately. She just stood there looking at me, her face unreadable. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer, that she would brush me off like she always did, but then she stepped toward me, her expression hardening. You're not hungry, she said coldly. You don't need to eat. You're fine the way you are. I flinched at her words, but for the first time, I didn't back down. No, I said, my voice shaking but firm. I am hungry. I need to eat. And then the silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. My mom's eyes flicked to me, then to the door as if she was looking for an escape, but she didn't find one, and neither did I. Something inside me snapped. For years, I had let my mom control me, let her dictate my every move. I had allowed myself to become invisible in a world where I was suffocating, but now I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't let her keep me hidden. As my mom turned away, I stood up, my hands shaking. I'm not going to live like this anymore, I whispered, but loud enough for her to hear. The words hung in the air between us, heavy with truth, with defiance. And then the truth started to pour out. The days after my confrontation with Mom were a blur. I don't remember much of what happened next. It was like everything I had been holding inside me finally started to unravel, but it was too much for me to handle. The fear, the guilt, the shame, it was all mixing together in a way that left me paralyzed. School, I started to fade even more. I could barely focus on my lessons. I wasn't sleeping, wasn't eating, wasn't anything anymore. My body was weak, my mind foggy, but I kept telling myself I could get through it. I had been getting through it for years, right? I could hold on just a little longer. Then one day, everything came crashing down. It was during gym class. I had never been good at sports, never been the athletic type, but I was always good at hiding it. Today, though, I couldn't hide anymore. My legs felt like they were made of rubber and my vision kept blurring. My heart was racing like it was trying to break free from my chest. I tried to keep moving, tried to ignore the dizziness, but I couldn't, and then it happened. I collapsed. I remember the sound of my body hitting the floor, the sharpness of the impact. I heard gasps, whispers, but everything felt so far away. The gym teacher rushed over to me, her voice frantic as she called for help. I could barely hear her over the pounding in my ears. Someone called the nurse. I was carried out of the gym and taken to the school's infirmary, but I couldn't focus on anything. My head was spinning and the darkness was closing in. The nurse told me to lie down to stay still, but I could hardly move. It wasn't until I heard her talking to someone else that it clicked. She was on the phone and I could hear the words hospital and malnutrition in the conversation. My heart dropped. She was talking about me. I don't know how long I stayed in the infirmary, but when I finally regained some sense of reality, I realized that everything had changed. Dad had been called. He rushed to the school, his face pale with worry. I saw him in the doorway standing frozen, his eyes wide as he looked at me. He didn't even need to ask what had happened. He could see it now, the bruises on my arms, the hollow look in my eyes. But Mom, she wasn't there. She wasn't there when I needed her most. What's going on? Dad asked softly, his voice shaking. Why didn't you tell me? The truth was right there, sitting between us. But I couldn't say it. I couldn't find the words. I had never told him the truth, and now after everything, it was too late. It was too late to take it all back. I'm fine, Dad, I lied, forcing a smile, even though my body was telling a different story. But my smile faltered as I saw the worry in his eyes. He knew something was wrong, he just didn't know how deep it went. Mom arrived later, but she didn't seem worried. She didn't seem anything. She walked into the room, her eyes scanning me like I was a piece of furniture she had to examine. What's all this? She asked, her voice flat. You're being dramatic again, aren't you? Dad's face turned red with anger. No, she's not being dramatic, she's sick. You can't keep pretending this isn't happening. But Mom just stood there staring at me as though I was some kind of inconvenience. She didn't care, she never had. She said slowly, her words cold, you've been eating too much lately. This is what happens when you don't control yourself. I froze at her words. It felt like a slap in the face. How could she say that after everything? I had been starving myself, barely surviving, and she still saw it as my fault. No, Dad said sharply, turning to Mom. This is your fault. You've been controlling her. You've been hurting her for years. I don't know how I didn't see it. It was in that moment, as I lay there in the infirmary surrounded by my parents, that I finally saw the truth. I had spent so many years trying to make myself disappear. I had convinced myself that I was the problem, that I wasn't good enough. I had let my mom make me believe that I wasn't worth anything, that I was too much, too big, too visible. But now, with my dad standing there finally seeing what was happening, I realized how wrong I had been. I wasn't the problem. It was my mom. She had controlled everything. She had made me feel like I didn't deserve anything. She had made me starve. It wasn't me who had failed, it was her. In the days that followed, everything started to fall apart. Dad took me to the doctor where I was diagnosed with severe malnutrition. My body had been slowly breaking down from the inside out. I had been living on nothing, pushing myself to the edge. But it wasn't just the food, it was the emotional weight of everything I had been carrying. The doctor explained that I was in a state of chronic malnutrition, that my heart was at risk of failing if I didn't start eating properly. The realization hit me like a wave. I had been slowly killing myself and I hadn't even known it. But the most shocking moment came when the doctor handed me the paperwork that would change everything. This, the doctor said quietly, pointing to a chart of my medical history, this shows a pattern of long-term neglect. We have evidence that you've been starved for years. It felt like the world had stopped. My body was breaking down, but my mom had kept it going, kept me trapped in a cycle of silence and control. The truth was finally out, and I was no longer the one hiding. Sterile cold hospital room felt like a prison. I could barely move, my body too weak to even sit up straight. My arms were covered in bruises, signs of malnutrition that I had carried for years, invisible to everyone but me. The heart monitors beeped steadily, the sounds sharp and unrelenting. I was hooked up to an IV drip, my body finally getting the nutrients it so desperately needed, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough to undo the damage that had been done. Dad had stayed by my side for most of the day. He was barely holding it together, his face a mixture of confusion, guilt, and anger. He couldn't understand how he had missed the signs. He hadn't seen the scale in Mom's closet, hadn't heard the quiet whispers of control and starvation that had ruled my life. I watched him in silence, his hands shaking as he held my hand. It was as though he was trying to will the situation to be different, to make everything right again, but it wasn't going to be that easy. Mom had left the room a few hours earlier. She'd come in, said a few cold words, and left just as quickly, like she couldn't bear to be in the same space as me. She didn't seem worried, didn't seem to care that I was slowly fading away. She was the one who had made me this way. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, but it was muted, distant. I didn't have the energy to be angry. I didn't have the energy for anything. A few hours later, Dr. Roberts came in with a folder in his hands, his face serious. He had been the one to diagnose me with severe malnutrition, and he was the one who had run the tests. I had seen him before, but never like this. His eyes were full of concern, but there was something else too, something darker. He said gently, sitting down beside my bed, I have the results of your tests. I need to go over them with you. I nodded weakly, my throat dry. The last few days had been a blur, but I could feel the weight of the situation starting to settle in. Dr. Roberts flipped through the folder, his fingers tracing over the documents. Your x-rays show significant bone density loss. Your organs are showing signs of chronic malnutrition. Your heart is at risk from the lack of nutrients. If you hadn't been brought in when you were, there's a chance you wouldn't have made it much longer. I wanted to say something to argue with him, but the words wouldn't come. I just lay there feeling numb. The truth was hitting me harder than I could process. He continued, his voice steady, though there was a hint of sadness in it. We also ran a series of blood tests. Your iron levels are dangerously low. Your vitamin D levels are almost non-existent. Your body has been deprived for far too long. Why didn't anyone see it? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Dr. Roberts sighed, looking at me with pity. It's hard to see something like this when the person doesn't show obvious signs, and in your case, it was happening so slowly, so subtly that it's easy to miss, especially when the people around you don't want to see it. I felt the tears welling up, but I didn't let them fall, not yet. I was ready to break down, not in front of him. We've also spoken to your father about your condition, Dr. Roberts continued. We've discussed the next steps for your recovery. We're going to have to start with a very controlled refeeding process. Your body can't handle large amounts of food right now. We'll have to gradually increase your calorie intake. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I could handle much of anything right now. Everything felt like too much. Too much information, too much pain. I couldn't process it all at once. Dr. Roberts paused, his eyes locking onto mine. I need you to understand something. This didn't just happen to you. This wasn't some random illness or condition. You've been systematically starved for years. The signs of abuse are clear, and we need to report this. You need to tell us what happened. For a moment, I didn't know how to respond. The truth felt like it was suffocating me, like a weight on my chest that I couldn't lift. But Dr. Roberts was waiting, his eyes kind but insistent. He needed me to speak. He needed me to tell him what had been happening. So I did. Took a deep breath, my hands trembling as I gripped the sheets. My mom, she made me weigh myself every day. Every morning while Dad was in the shower, she would make me stand on the scale. She announced the number, and if it was too high, I didn't get to eat. If it was too low, I didn't get to eat either. She'd say I wasn't trying hard enough. She'd say I was disgusting. Dr. Roberts didn't interrupt. He just listened, his face showing no judgment, only compassion. She would make me eat almost nothing, I continued, my voice shaking now. Rice cakes, celery sticks, nothing more. While got sandwiches and cookies, I got nothing, I got scraps. I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. She told me I was fat, she told me I was too big, she'd say I was taking up too much space. Tears came then, I couldn't hold them back anymore. It was like everything I had been hiding for so long was finally spilling out, like the floodgates had opened. I sobbed, feeling the weight of the years of silence, of suffering, of trying to make myself invisible. Dr. Roberts didn't say anything for a long time. He just let me cry, let me release everything I had been holding inside. Finally, he spoke, his voice gentle but firm. I'm so sorry, this is not your fault. You are not responsible for what happened to you. You are a survivor. After a long silence, Dr. Roberts continued. We're going to make sure this is taken seriously. We're going to report this to the authorities. We have the medical evidence. We have your blood tests, your x-rays, your records. We're going to make sure your mom is held accountable for what she's done. I nodded, though a part of me was still in disbelief. I had been so conditioned to believe it was my fault, to believe that I deserved the punishment, but now I was starting to see that it wasn't me, it was her. She's not getting away with this, Dr. Roberts said, his voice full of conviction. We're going to make sure of that. Later that day, Dad came back to visit. He looked different, like he had been through a storm, but he was there and he was trying. He was finally starting to see everything for what it was. I don't know how I missed it, he said, sitting down beside me, his voice thick with emotion. I should have known, I should have done something. I shook my head, my voice barely a whisper. It's not your fault, Dad. She made sure you didn't see it. She made sure you were blind to everything. Dad nodded, tears welling up in his eyes. I'm so sorry for not being there for you. I reached out and took his hand. It's not too late, Dad. We can fix this, we'll fix this. It wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't be fast, but for the first time in my life, I felt like there was hope. Dr. Roberts was right, I was a survivor, and I would fight to heal, to recover, to rebuild the pieces of myself that had been broken for so long. And most importantly, I would never let anyone make me feel invisible again. Days in the hospital felt like a blur. Each day I woke up feeling more and more like a stranger in my own body, as if I were being rebuilt from the inside out. Dr. Roberts and the team had started me on a slower feeding process, which was supposed to help my body adjust, but I wasn't sure how to adjust to the truth. The reality of what had happened was settling in, and I wasn't sure how to live with it. How could I look at my family the same way again? How could I ever go back to pretending everything was fine? When Dad came back that evening, it was like he was a different person. His face had softened, and there was a kind of determination in his eyes. He wasn't just the man I had known before. He was someone who had seen what I had been through, and he wasn't going to let it slide anymore. He said gently, sitting down beside me, I'm so sorry for not seeing it sooner. I don't know how I missed everything, how I didn't see the signs. I could see the guilt in his eyes, the weight of regret that he hadn't noticed what had been happening under his roof. The truth was, neither of us had. How could we? Mom had made sure to keep everything hidden, keep it in the dark where no one could see. It was easier that way. Dad, I whispered, my voice hoarse, it's not your fault. He shook his head, his hands trembling as he held mine. It is, I should seen it, I should fought harder. But even as I said those words, I knew the truth. It was Dad's fault, it wasn't even mine, it was hers. It was always going to be hers. The realization hit me like a wave. Mom wasn't just a mother, she was a manipulator, someone who twisted everything around to make me believe that I was the problem, that I was too big, that I was too much. I was a reflection of her insecurities, and she made sure I knew it every single day. It wasn't just the food, it wasn't just the scales, it was everything, the control, the manipulation, the isolation. She had made me feel small. She had made me feel like I didn't deserve to take up space, like I didn't deserve to eat, to be happy, and I had believed her. But now I was starting to see through it. I was starting to see that she wasn't the perfect mother I had always thought she was. She was broken just like me. Days turned into weeks, and I was slowly adjusting to my new reality. I had to learn to eat again, to trust my body again, and it wasn't easy. The temptation to slip back into the old ways was always there, lurking in the background, whispering to me that I wasn't good enough, that I wasn't deserving of food. But every day I fought it. Every day I reminded myself that I was worthy, that I deserved to live. Dr. Roberts was a constant presence, checking on me every day, making sure I was progressing. But there was something else that had started to shift, something more personal. One afternoon, as I was sitting in the hospital room, I saw a familiar face walk through the door. It was the social worker from Child Protective Services. She had been working on my case, gathering evidence, and ensuring that the authorities were aware of what had been happening at home. She said, her voice soft but firm, I know this isn't easy, but we need to talk about the next steps. We're ready to move forward with the case. I nodded slowly, unsure of what to expect. What did moving forward mean? What did it mean for my family? I still wasn't sure if I could trust Dad completely, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to confront Mom, but I knew something had changed. Sat down beside me, her eyes kind but serious. We've gathered the evidence, your medical records, the x-rays, your blood tests, the recordings. We have enough to move forward with legal action, but we need you to tell us everything. We need your side of the story. The words hung in the air, heavy and real. It was time to stop hiding. It was time to tell the truth, even if it meant losing everything. Took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment press down on me. It started when I was 11, I began, my voice shaky but determined. Mom would make me weigh myself every morning. If I was over a certain weight, I wouldn't get to eat. She told me I was too fat. She said I was disgusting. Every day, she'd make me stand on that scale. Every morning while Dad was in the shower, she'd announce my weight. Nodded, her pen moving swiftly across the notepad in her lap. What else? I hesitated for a moment, the words catching in my throat, but I knew I had to say it. I knew I had to let it out. She'd give everything sandwiches, cookies, snacks, and I'd get nothing. I'd get celery sticks, rice cakes. Sometimes I'd get nothing at all. She'd say I didn't deserve to eat. She tell me I wasn't trying hard enough. And if I complained, she'd say I was just being dramatic. Didn't interrupt, but I could see the pain in her eyes. She understood. She knew this wasn't just about food. It was about control. It was about manipulation. It was about my mom making me believe I wasn't worth anything. Did your father know? She asked gently. I shook my head. No, he didn't know. He was always working, always distracted. He never saw it. I don't think he wanted to see it. The conversation was interrupted by a knock on the door. I looked up to see Dad standing there looking unsure, his face filled with guilt and regret. But behind that, I saw something else, something new, a flicker of determination, a flicker of hope. Can I come in? He asked, his voice soft. Looked between us and nodded, of course. Dad walked in slowly, sitting down beside me. He didn't speak at first, just stared at the floor, the weight of everything hanging over him. I've heard what's been happening, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I don't know how I missed it, how I let it go on for so long, but I want to make it right. I want to fix this. I want to be the father I should been. I didn't know what to say. For so long, I had been angry with him, angry for not seeing the truth, for not protecting me. But now, seeing him here, seeing him want to fix it, I realized something. He wasn't the enemy. Mom was. He was just as much a victim of her manipulation as I was. I reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. It's not your fault, Dad. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to make you see. He squeezed my hand back, his eyes red. We're going to get through this together. That night, I didn't sleep much. I couldn't, my mind kept replaying everything, the pain, the fear, the guilt, but I also felt something else, something new, a sense of relief. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone. I had allies, I had Dad, I had people who were willing to help me, to stand by me and fight for me. And most importantly, I had the truth. Day of the hearing arrived, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as if it were trying to escape. Dad and I had spent the morning going through everything, papers, medical records, and the evidence that had been gathered against Mom. I had written down everything. I remembered every moment where I was told I wasn't enough, every time the food was. And now here we were, standing on the precipice of a truth that would either set me free or break everything I had left. Walking into the courtroom felt surreal. The cold, hard bench, the distant faces of strangers who were about to judge my family, and Mom sitting at the other end of the room, her face blank and cold, like she was immune to any of this. She looked the same pristine clothes, same cold expression, same mask of perfection that had fooled everyone for so long. But now it was different. The mask was cracking, and I could see the truth behind it. I could see her for what she truly was, someone who had systematically broken me down piece by piece for years. Dad stood beside me, and I could feel the tension between us. He had seen the truth now, but that didn't make the past go away. I had always thought he would protect me, that he would keep me safe. But how could he protect me from her, from the woman he had married? When it was finally my turn to speak, I walked to the witness stand with shaky legs, my heart in my throat. The court was quiet, all eyes on me, but I could barely hear the room over the sound of my own breathing. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to let fear control me anymore. I began speaking, my voice trembling at first but growing steadier with every word. My mom, she would make me weigh myself every day. I had to stand on a scale while Dad was in the shower every day. She would announce my weight, and if I was good enough, I didn't get to eat. Sometimes she wouldn't let me eat at all. The room was silent as I continued, speaking of the 3 celery sticks and the rice cakes, the empty plates, the manipulation, the lies. Whenever I said I was hungry, she told me I was being dramatic. She said I was too fat to deserve food. She made me feel like I didn't deserve anything. I looked over at Mom, sitting there, her eyes narrowed, her lips pressed into a thin line. I could see the tension in her face, the fear she was trying to hide. But I couldn't back down now. I couldn't let her lie her way out of this. I wasn't allowed to eat. I wasn't allowed to take up space. She made me feel like I was worthless. I paused, feeling the weight of the words as they hit the air, and I believed her. After I spoke, the room shifted. The judge looked at me with something akin to empathy in his eyes, but there was also a quiet understanding that this wasn't just a family dispute. This was something much darker, something that had been hidden for far too long. Step forward next, laying out the evidence, the medical records, the x-rays, the blood tests, and the recordings. She played the audio from the award ceremony, the moment I had spoken out in front of everyone, the words that had been a cry for help. And then the bombshell's confession about the laxatives Mom had made her put in my food. It was too much, it was all too much. But it was the truth, and there was no way for Mom to deny it anymore. She could no longer manipulate the situation. The evidence was overwhelming. The judge listened carefully, his face hardening with every word. He asked a few more questions, and then he made his decision. He said, his voice calm but firm, "This is a case of severe neglect, and it has gone on for far too long. We will be granting full custody to your father. Your mother will have supervised visits until further evaluations are completed." Mom's face contorted with anger, but there was no escaping it now. The truth was out, and there was nothing she could do to hide from it anymore. As we left the courtroom, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, sadness, but above all, a sense of freedom. For the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. In the weeks that followed, life started to shift. Dad and I worked through our relationship. It wasn't easy. There was so much left unsaid, so much we had to heal from, but we started to communicate more, to be there for each other in ways we never had before. I could see the guilt in his eyes, but I also saw the love. He didn't know everything, but he was trying, and that was enough. I started therapy a few days after the hearing. It was hard. The therapist, Shani, was kind but firm. She didn't let me hide from my feelings. She helped me process everything, what had happened, how I had been manipulated, how I had allowed myself to believe I was unworthy. And it wasn't just about food. It was about learning to trust myself again. It was about learning to take up space, to not apologize for my existence, to not feel guilty for wanting to live. One day, while I was sitting with Dad in the kitchen, he asked me how I was feeling. I was eating dinner for the first time in what felt like forever, and I wasn't afraid to eat anymore. The food wasn't my enemy anymore. "I'm better," I said softly. "I'm learning to eat again. I'm learning to live again." Dad smiled, his eyes filled with pride. "I'm so proud of you. I don't know how we got here, but I'm going to make sure we get through this together." It wasn't perfect. There were still days where I felt the weight of everything on my shoulders, days when I struggled to see myself the way others did, but I was getting there, one step at a time. Two was finding her way. It wasn't easy for her either. She had been caught in the middle of everything, too scared to speak out, too scared to do anything that would make mom angry, but she was starting to open up, starting to heal in her own way. We talked more now. We shared our fears, our hopes, and for the first time, I felt like we were sisters again, truly connected. But there was one thing I knew would never go away, the scar that had been left on me, the scar that mom had created, the emotional scar of believing I wasn't enough, of believing I didn't deserve to eat, to live, to take up space. It would always be a part of me. It would always be there, a reminder of the years I had lost, the years I had spent trying to be invisible, but it didn't define me anymore. It was more than the scars, more than the trauma. I was stronger now, stronger than I had ever been before. What I had learned through all of this was simple. I was worthy. I deserved to be loved, to be cared for, to take up space. And the most important lesson of all, no one has the right to make you feel small, to make you feel like you don't deserve anything. We all have the power to break free. We all have the power to heal. Have you ever had to confront a painful truth in your life? What did you learn from it? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Comment below and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about resilience, healing, and finding your truth.